10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
Good morning and welcome to the Space Stream. Just give me 1 second here and we'll get started. So I am super excited. I now have 17 subscribers. Awesome. Thanks everybody for subscribing. And if you're here, hit the like button and please give me a subscribe. We're going to get into the show here. Today is going to be Space Stream. We're going to learn about rockets and lunar updates from the Artemis program. Maybe, if it's working. So we're going to start with how do rocket engines work. It's actually simpler than you think. So we'll go through some diagrams and we'll talk about it just a little bit. If you have any questions, please just throw them in the chat. Be happy to answer them. Alright, so this is a basic diagram of a rocket engine. It's kind of a basic rocket engine. What we start with is up here, we have turbo pumps. So these are the pumps that draw in all of the propellant. So one side you'll have, for this engine specifically, one side we have liquid hydrogen. So hydrogen's very cold when it's liquid, very flammable. So that's good for, obviously, a rocket engine. And then on the other side, you have a similar situation where you have a turbo pump that pumps super cold liquid oxygen. So oxygen, as we know, helps things burn, makes them burn better. So we add that to ensure that we're getting good burning. So next we move into these turbines here. So some of the fuel will bypass, this one's set up a little bit different, but some of the fuel will go into a chamber and it will go through a pre-burner. So this will be the hydrogen. So it'll burn off a little bit of the hydrogen, create some heat, and that will turn the turbine, which turns the turbo pump to draw more in. They also, in this specific engine, use the liquid hydrogen fuel for the oxygen turbo pump as well. But as we can see with this routing diagram, the oxygen goes straight into the combustion chamber. So what we do with that is we go ahead and pre-burn the fuel, and then up here, this is kind of overly simplistic, but up here, what's going to happen is the fuel's going to mix. It's going to go through a pressure plate with some very small holes, and it's going to shoot into this combustion chamber. Inside the combustion chamber, it obviously combusts. The fuel and the oxidizer, hydrogen and oxygen, explode in this chamber. They get caught by the throat, which causes pressure buildup and increase in speed and stuff like that. And then you see the bottom, which is the engine bell. That's where the combustion fans out, and that's what produces the thrust to make the rocket go up. So pretty cool, pretty exciting to see. It's more complicated than it looks on this diagram, but it's not as complicated as people give it credit for. Another thing that generally happens, these rocket engines, and as we'll see with the Artemis engines, they have to be super cooled, or if not, they would just melt, even though they're a special alloy. Usually it's an alloy called Inconel 718. And even though that can withstand high temperatures, it can't withstand the combustion in a rocket engine. So there will be piping and tubing that will force the liquid oxygen around the bell of the engine and the combustion chamber to keep it very cold on the outside. Here's a little bit more of a, move this kind of, here's a little bit more of a complex image, maybe. Here's a little bit more of a complex image. This shows you different, the fuel and the oxidant are different colors. Shows you the different piping and a little bit more complex piping. Some of the turbo pumps where the gases are, things of that kind of nature. It shows you more of the pressure plates, the fuel valves. This also shows things like the coolant and the nozzle, things of that nature. So this one, same idea, just slightly more complex. So again, oxidizer in, then you have your fuel in. Ultimately they mix in the middle here and then go down through the nozzle and produce thrust. So pretty simple. So let's talk about a specific engine because it kind of rolls into our update with Artemis. So this engine is the Aerojet Rocketdyne engine. Aerojet Rocketdyne is a company that's been around for a very long time, and they produce rocket engines. So we're going to go into a little bit about Artemis's engines and show you a little bit more about how the engine actually functions and things like that. So the RS-25 is usually known as the Space Shuttle main engine. That's what it was designed for, and that's where its heritage is. The actual development started in the 1960s It was thought they were going to use it at one point on the Saturn V rocket, or an updated version of the Saturn V, and decided against it. Used the F1s instead. But so this engine produces specific impulse, which is what they measure rocket engines by. Complex, so I'll just leave it at measurement of rocket engines. Specific impulse of 452 seconds in a vacuum, or 366 seconds at sea level. Again, there's a lot to explain with rocket engines, so I'll try and simplify and break it down just a little bit. Rocket engines have to be either sea level optimized or vacuum optimized, and the difference is with the way the propulsion is designed, with the way that things are burned off, different things like that. So there's a difference between a sea level and a vacuum optimized. Mostly the pressure's pushing against the engine. So the engine itself weighs about 7,700 pounds, or about 3.5 tons, and it can operate at temperatures of minus 253 to plus 3,300 Celsius, or minus 400 to plus 6,000 Fahrenheit. So Rocketdyne said they were going to stop making this engine altogether, and they decided against that and started reproducing the engine. So this was, like I said, on the space shuttle. It is now on the Space Launch System, or the Artemis rocket that we've seen. Looking through to make sure I didn't forget anything. So it is the turbopumps are a 6-stage turbine powered by oxidizer and high pressure liquid oxygen. So it runs about 5,100 revolutions per minute, and they're pretty big, 18 by 18 inches. So that's just for the turbo pump. So as we saw, there's tons of different things for the turbo pump. So the pre-burners have a hot gas manifold, they have a spark igniter, and they pre-burn the fuel to generate power for those turbo pumps. And then once the gas is hot, it mixes with the oxygen and it explodes. So very large nozzle on the engine, and these engines can gimbal, which means they can turn 10.5 degrees plus minus, so they can turn either way to help steer or stabilize the rocket while it's in flight. In addition to, in this specific system, they have a helium system, and the main propulsion is equipped with helium to kind of prep and pressurize the system. So that's what that is for. And that's about it for that section of that. So we'll go into... So this is the Rocketdyne Aerojet RS-25 engine. As you can see, there's a lot of complexity. This is your hot gas manifold. These are all different wirings and tubes. This is the cooling system. So the liquid oxygen will flow through the cooling system and cool the bell so it doesn't overheat. And a bunch of electronics and different things up in that area. This is the same RS-25 engine, and I put this one in just for scale. Those are, average adult humans, so pretty big compared to the humans. And like on SLS, the Space Launch System, or Artemis, there are 4 of those as base motors, and then the 2 strap-on boosters. So there are 4 of those big engines that power that. This is the engine in operation. I believe this is at Stennis, no, this is at Huntsville, excuse me, during what they called the green run, or the test run for the engines. As you can see, it's frosty. It's really cold. And you would think that, a rocket engine would be kind of glowing red hot, but not a common misconception, because they are incredibly cold, or they would melt. If it's glowing red, 1, it's probably a vacuum engine, and 2, there's probably a problem if it's not. So just wanted to throw that in so you could see there's active flame, obviously, at the bottom here, but it's super chilly and covered in ice. So we'll go into a little bit about the RS-25. As you can see, weighs about 8,000 pounds, 7,700 as we saw. It's 8 foot in diameter and 14 feet tall. So it is massive. Up here you can see a little bit of where it started and where it went. So it started in California. That's where they design it. And then it goes to Mississippi to test. Then it goes to Louisiana to be put on the rocket. And then it goes to Kennedy for the launch. The RS-25s fire non-stop for 8.5 minutes. So they have to withstand that heat for quite some time. It's they're long duration flights. It takes a minute to get to space. So and cool fun facts, hot gases exit at 13 times the speed of sound. So that's the thrust is made by those gases leaving so quickly. Here's a chart about power level of the Artemis rocket, or the Rocketdyne RS-25s. It can only operate at minimum in a vacuum, and that is 316,000 pounds of force. So the rated power level. And another thing with rockets is they are rated, and then they are overbuilt for their rating. So if I need it to perform at 600 pounds, just for instance, then I have to rate it for 660 pounds, because I have to go 10% for margin of safety. So that's what we see here. Kind of the rated power level is 470,000 pounds. the nominal power level, so the power level that they would like to operate it at, is 490,000 pounds. And then at full power, it's 510,000 pounds. So that's how much thrust that each engine has. So that's how much it can lift. So now we're going to go into Artemis specifically and have an update with the dark side of the moon. So if you watched my launch coverage, you will have already seen this. It's kind of infographic. So this shows in detail kind of what it did. So it started here at Kennedy, flew around the Earth, and then came around here. Somewhere in here, I think, oh, right here, A, B, and C, it dropped off a bunch of CubeSats, so that's cool. Just an extra benefit to the mission, wasn't totally for, for nothing. So then we're going to spin around, and then we're going to come back around, and we're going to come back around again, and we're going to do a close view of the moon. And then we're going to flop around here, and then eventually it will come back to Earth. We are about right here in the timeline, really close to that 12. So we're getting close to it coming back, and hard part's over. So it's already made it up. So we'll watch a short video about the other side of the moon and the flyby from the Artemis rocket. Maybe. There we go.
Planet Earth. Orion started its journey 5 days ago from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where it launched aboard the Space Launch System. Orion has been traveling to the moon ever since, performing checkouts of its systems, as this is an uncrewed test flight.
So that's the Orion capsule on the left, and that's the moon on the
hardware
right.
and systems aboard Orion ahead of flying a crew on board Artemis 2.
I was waiting for NASA to start talking again, but apparently they're not going to. So I fell in here. So it is actually moving. Looks like it's still, but it is moving right along. Or should be, unless I paused it again. No, we're moving. So it's moving very slowly. Space is vast, and they're huge distances. So again, that to the left is the Artemis capsule with a, I think they said it was a GoPro, but I don't know for certain. A GoPro to go ahead and record and we're coming up to the dark side of the moon, or the reverse side. Kind of curious that they start going over there. If anybody knows or follows space travel, China just landed some rovers on the dark side of the moon, the back side, and I think there was definitely some intention or interest by flying around back to see what's going on over there. So this is about, I want to say this 4 days ago, footage of, so this would have been that first loop, that first circle. So. And again, it is moving, it's just very slow. Speed it up here a little bit.
Flyby will send Orion close enough. Everything still on track. While behind the moon, Orion will perform the outbound powered flyby, which the team here in Mission Control is ready for. Flight Director Rick LeBrode pulled the team. Everyone is pulling go. Everything still on track for the outbound powered flyby burn, now 20 minutes away.
So yes,
this outbound powered flyby will send Orion close enough to the lunar surface to leverage the moon's gravitational force and swing the spacecraft once around the moon toward entry into distant retrograde orbit. Following this, Orion will remain in the distant retrograde orbit for one long elliptical around the moon, which will last about 6 days. Now, this is different than what was done during the Apollo program, when the spacecraft orbited much closer to the moon. Now, this orbit is called distant due to the high altitude from the moon. It's about 40,000 miles past the moon in its orbit. This is actually 30,000 miles farther than the previous record set during Apollo 13, and will be the farthest in space any spacecraft built for humans will have ever flown. This orbit is called retrograde because Orion will travel around the moon opposite the direction the moon travels around Earth. Distant retrograde orbit provides a highly stable orbit where little fuel is required to stay for an extended trip in deep space, and allows the opportunity to put Orion's systems to the test in an environment far from Earth. We are now less than 2 minutes away from our anticipated loss of signal as Orion travels behind the moon.
Okay, so in the lower left-hand, or kind of right in the middle, but to the left of the moon, that is indeed the Earth. That is the blue marble in which we live on, and I think it's awesome that you can see the Earth from behind the moon from a spacecraft. And a couple things with that, as they said, this is the furthest a human-rated spacecraft has ever traveled, but still, curiously, not out of our sphere of influence. So no one has ever left the sphere of influence of the Earth that we know of.
As we continue to get live views here for the next minute or so, we will potentially see the Earth start to go just behind the moon as Orion travels behind the moon. We will not have Earth views, of course, because the moon will be blocking the Orion spacecraft. However, we do anticipate an acquisition of signal at 6:59 a.m. Central. It's about a 34-minute loss of signal, at which point we hope to regain communications with the spacecraft.
And the reason that they lose signal is obviously because the moon is in the way. So they don't have a robust enough satellite network up around the moon currently to be able to broadcast signal from behind the moon. So it's really difficult to get signal, and you see the spacecraft is turning to try and catch it, but now it is lost signal. So it loses signal.
And we do have loss of signal. Again, this is a 34-minute, 4-second loss of signal.
And this is now an animation, and the video's done here in just a second, but this is an animation of telemetry. So it takes in the information and provides NASA with telemetry, where the spacecraft's at, how it's oriented, what it looks like, what's all the good stuff about it. So pretty cool to see the backside of the moon. We've not put a lot of resource or energy into going back there, so I think it's cool. And this is the first step to humans being on the moon, which, sign me up. I'd happily go. So yeah, with that, I think that's going to be it for today. We learned a little bit about rocket engines and the specific engine that took this capsule to the moon. We got to see the moon, got to see the sun, the Earth, and got to see some pictures from the spacecraft. And what I was saying at the end there is the spacecraft was trying to keep the signal, so it was reorienting to try and see the Earth. So pretty good rule is if you can see the Earth, you can get signal. If you can't, probably not. So that's going to be it for today. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching. And I look forward to seeing everybody next time. Have a good day, and go USA in a couple hours here. All right, take care. Bye-bye.